I had a lot of fun. Some good content, some good people. It's good to be back in person for the first time in quite a long time. It was awesome.
This is the Insurance Technology Podcast, where we bring interesting people from across the insurance ecosystem to discuss and debate technology's impact on the industry. Join us each episode for insights and best practices from industry stewards and tomorrow's innovators.
You're not Reed Holsworth.
That's right, and you're not Reed Holsworth. You're not Reed Holsworth either. It's Mike Albert, Allan Egbert again, because I think we did have, what was it, the third or fourth highest rated podcast in the history of the Reed Holsworth Insurtech podcast on the Ivans Podcast Network.
Reed Holsworth Story Hour. Dude, that is not the world's sweetest accolade. The third highest rated Reed Holsworth podcast.
We were number 3 in Insurtech entertainment on the Ivans Podcast Network.
Impressive. Well, look, we've taken it over today, whatever that means. We paid $54.20 a share. That's
right. So producer Kristen is like nodding her head at us to get to some better content. So
hey guys, talk about Insurtech Boston.
That's it. Queued up. So we are now, what was it, 2 weeks? 2 weeks coming off of Insurtech.
2 weeks removed from the 7th edition.
So how'd you think it went?
It went great. I was really, really happy with how it went. And I've gotten great feedback from people that they were happy with how it went. And that's what really matters. Who cares what you or I think? But I had a lot of fun. Some good content, some good people. It's good to be back in person for the first time in quite a long time. It was awesome. What'd you think?
Yeah, largely agree for sure. I mean, I think, it's the first time you and I did not have to do anything. Actually, we went from doing everything to having to do nothing. I think,
you excel at doing nothing.
No, it was fantastic. I think the thing that was pulled off best was it felt like an Insurtech Boston event, but it sort of was, able to have, because all these things have to be different. Otherwise they get boring or stale. You go to some other town and you see empty seats and, the only people more tired or bored than the crowd is the panel, at that event, where they've got those empty seats. So you've got to, you got to find ways to mix it up and keep it fresh and keep it different and figure out how to maintain the things that, people do like the best. And I think Ivans and Applied, nailed that, for sure. There was more production value and more dollars put in, but it still felt like an Insurtech Boston event.
Yeah, that's a good synopsis. Front and center at Insurtech Boston have always been a couple of things. Number one, startups. That to me has, over the life of Insurtech Boston since 2016, always been the thing that people are always most excited about coming out of the event. Having heard from folks out there doing it, and I felt like the crew that we had this time was awesome and told some really good stories. Alan, Jason, Kabir, Philippe, all those guys just were so compelling, and it was really a lot of fun. So that's number one. And then number two is networking. Just making sure there's plenty of time for folks to talk to one another, because that frankly is why we all go to events in this industry, to meet up with people, to meet new people. And I thought we did a nice job this time. I'm not trying to pat ourselves on the back. And in fact, credit to the team, not you and I, for building on those concepts, making sure that they stayed put as a core, while also doing some new things, and setting up some new extended content, some good panels. We'll talk more about that on this podcast. It was great. And the roof party, that was great afterwards. Some extended fun time too for the networking.
I don't know. Let's hit some around some of these panel topics.
Let's do it.
So the first one was moderated, take your pick, by Saima. And it was an agent panel, largely discussing broker technology, brokers' relationships with carriers, which seems largely centered around their usage of technology, amongst other things. So what did you think about, there's some of this perspective in terms of, I think the original theme was sort of like when insurtechs really started exploding on the scene, like they were calling themselves insurtechs, they were raising a lot of money. What were your thoughts, Mike, just sort of like, the relationship of those companies and agents and how agents maybe perceive them?
Well, I'll say first that any panel with Val Feeney on it is a panel I'm going to. That is a guy that needs to be on the Reed Holsworth podcast. Get Val Feeney going on any number of topics and watch the magic unfold. And
maybe a correction, it's celebrity broker.
Sorry.
Val Feeney.
So that is a registered trademark. Celebrity broker, Val Feeney. Really good discussion on this panel around broker adoption, and in particular some of the conflicts that have happened historically between insurtech and agents and brokers. Some really interesting perspectives and reactions on how folks started in terms of how they were thinking about technology moving into the agent space, and where things have sort of ended up now that we've normalized and are, certainly many years into this whole insurtech trend. So very interesting discussion on this panel.
So let's start with the first question, which is, why is it that insurance agencies have not been a big part of the insurtech conversation? And what's changed, if anything, in the last couple of years?
That's an easy one because we're not supposed to be here. 10 years ago, Insurtech, I'm going to pick on you, but you weren't the only guilty parties here. The channel of the independent agent was gone. It was dead. It wasn't supposed to be around. But that just didn't come to fruition. And so the technology that was aimed to replace the broker has now become the direct-to-consumer, and brokers have kind of pivoted a little bit. So instead of being defensive and just hating technology, we've embraced the fact that technology allows us to perform our best for our customer. So if we give the customer the best experience, the only way we can do that is by utilizing the best technology. Because in our field, the price at the end of the day, the bottom line, yes, it factors into it, but the strategy that we're providing our clients is what wins us the business. And you can fall into the trap of over-promising and under-delivering. And how you avoid doing that is utilizing the best technology around for your clients. And that's kind of helped us embrace technology and realizing that it helps us be successful. And it's not just, eating our profits or being a competitor of ours.
And Val, do you have any good examples you could share with us on that topic specifically?
Yeah, so Alera Group, what I really like about Alera Group is that they have started a national department called P&C Agency Services. My colleague Natalie DeCecca is over here, so all you tech guys, if you want to get an appointment, she's standing over against the wall. They've identified technology that we can all use to improve the experience for our clients. One of them is Indio, for example, right? Pesky apps. Every year our team's getting renewal apps or even new business apps. What it does, it allows the client or prospect to work in real time with the broker and their team on an application. It's kind of like TurboTax experience. That type of technology and forward thinking allows us to speed up or make pieces of the process more efficient, because at the end of the day, the time is what's killing us. And I used to hammer carriers being like, you need to go faster, you need to go faster. But in reality, the client and your own team can sometimes be a big problem and a big piece of that time suck. So anything that can speed up the time of those little processes along the way will be beneficial for brokers.
Amazing. Chris, what's your perspective?
I was going to start with where Val did, and they were told, agents and brokers were told they were dead. So why would you engage in a party with people who told you that you were not adding value and were not thinking creatively? And so it's been fantastic to see that evolve. And I'm just curious, how many agents or brokers are in the room? That's fantastic, because one of my answers was going to say, I don't think they've been invited enough. So it's great to see agents and brokers being a part of this conversation. Another couple things. So I mentioned that I spent a lot of my career, the vast majority of my career on the carrier side. I don't think agents and brokers necessarily have felt that they've had to embrace technology the way other industries have. We talk about how resilient the industry is, how it can survive major catastrophic, major economic conditions. The broker side of the business is pretty resilient and it's pretty stable. Even the worst agents and brokers have pretty good retentions. Renewable income is great. Consumers haven't necessarily put great demands on this industry to keep up with other segments in the industry. So there's been a little bit of, I guess, okay lagging in this industry that said we just haven't necessarily had to do it. But it's been really fascinating to think about what's going on here. And again, you go back to this conversation that Val started around the fact that whether it was Insurtech, whether it was some other industry consultants who said, hey, the broker's dead. That is just not true. So one of the great things of having just joined the Big I was able to go into some market share data, prepping for a conversation I'm going to have next month in Florida. And the Big I keeps 8 years of market share data, both in personal and in commercial lines, industry-wide, countrywide. The market share in 2020, which is the last published data, is at an 8-year high. So for a group of people who were supposed to be dead, dying on the vine, going to be consumed by direct-to-consumer capabilities, the independent channel actually controls more insurance market share in the US than they did 8 years ago through the Insurtech craze. So I think that's a phenomenal statement to the power of the independent agent. And now we're in this cadence now where tech providers, carriers, and agencies, by and large, are in this conversation together and kind of advancing the cause here. And consumers still want to do business with this group.
Amazing. So that's a really amazing stat. Now, since it is one of the dominant group, especially in the US, there's a lot of technology coming towards agents, and there's a lot of technology out there. Do you think it's a struggle for agents to actually adopt new technology? And Chris, I'll start with you now on that topic.
To me, there's two prongs to that, and we could spend the whole hour on this conversation, and I promise we won't. But there's adoption, but before adoption, there's choice. And I don't know, I've used this a couple times, and it's simple to me. I break things down into cheesy analogies, but I think about the visual of Chevy Chase in Christmas Vacation. He bought every shiny, I'm guessing it was Kmart back then. It certainly wasn't, maybe Menards or Lowe's or whatever, but he bought every single possible decoration in the world to have the best display in his neighborhood. And when he plugged in the stupid lights, nothing happened. Why? He bought everything. He didn't put any thought into it. There was no strategy behind how he was going to put the stuff together and how it was going to sequence. And those kind of things are phenomenal. So I think what's happened right now is part of why agents might not have been involved, if we compare these two conversations, is there's just way too much choice, way too many things to think about. They don't know where to start. The technology might not make sense. So what we've seen now is agencies taking a deep breath. It's okay. Technology's here to help. Technology companies want to enable the independent channel, want to add value, but an agency, regardless of size or what their strategic purpose is, the ones that are kind of getting through this, and more of them are slowing down, taking a deep breath, aligning what their competitive business strategy is, what customers do they want to attract, what geographies do they want to focus on, how do they want to differentiate in the marketplace, and then they're using some semblance of the data that they already have at their disposal to actually find the most meaningful areas that they can influence in their agency, and then choosing technology. So we're not reacting necessarily to the most loud voice on social media or fear-based decisioning.
Awesome. Well, again, along those veins, and this is more for Val and Traci, is what can carriers and partners do today that will really help the agents go through change management and adopt new technology?
I think it's understanding that we have to walk. There's a lot of pieces that need to come into place before we can adopt new technology. Strategy is the biggest one. How are we going to use it? What are our clients saying? We all have different clientele. Some are more demanding. Some understand there's a patient process depending on the number of markets you have. So understanding that piece, but also seeing how it works. What do we need? Understanding download, working with Ivans. Understanding we don't want to do things twice. So I've worked with a few vendors already, and some actually have listened a little bit, not necessarily to me, but there's a company out there, Wonderwrite. There's other ones, Haphazard. They're listening that we need an integration. We understand that on our agency management system, it's not always easy to work with and break those walls down, but bring us to the table. Let us talk. Let us figure out what it is that we need, what our clients. You talked about the commercial application for renewal. You may only need, 3 pieces of information on an 8-page app. When a client may receive something like that, that's not, think of anybody. You don't want to look at something. You're hesitant to even respond. Just say, I'll do that later. So understanding we have a speed to market and we need to reduce the friction. How can you help us and bring that in, whether it's download, integrations with our management systems, all those little pieces, and understanding how we can make sure our data is in the highest integrity.
You said something really important there, bring you into the conversation that helps not only the technology partners, but it also helps you be part of that process and integrate that into your change management because you've been part of the design. So that's really important, is bringing people into the conversation early and often.
You and I have reflected and riffed on this a lot, but when I'm thinking about how the agents, and I've heard this before. So initially it was, you get a lot of companies coming in, a lot of bluster. Hey, we're taking over. We're going to, we're pushing out the agents who are sort of like the risk intermediaries, and the technology is going to replace it. And then, as time went on, that was sort of replaced with, oh no, just kidding. We're building technology for these folks. And I think Val said some things that sort of reflected that. By that time he was someone who actually came from insurance technology before he was an agent, but certainly, that's not what we were ever doing. But there were early on definitely like strong plays that, largely, prophesized the end of the agent for, the millionth time. And it did not, that prophecy of doom, Mike, did not come to pass. So
Indeed.
So the other big topic, Mike, was around carrier-agent relationship, which, as you and I both know, if you ask an agency about the relationship with one specific carrier, they'll tell you one thing, and then the carrier will have a completely different sort of perspective on that relationship. So what did you think of like that segment, and just some thoughts around that as they dug into it?
It's such a rich topic. Last time we were on the podcast, we mentioned AgencyPort. You and I both used to work there. One of the greatest things that we ever did at AgencyPort for marketing content was the Agent Insight Tour, which is still on YouTube, believe it or not. So it's under the AgencyPort YouTube account, long since abandoned, but the videos are out there. Go check them out if you care about this topic.
Or I would be fine if you don't check them out.
Oh, you're on some of those videos, dude.
Yeah.
And what is fascinating about those? So we had a professional videographer set up a camera while we sat down and talked to these agents about the carriers, and frankly talked to some carriers on this trip as well. And to hear the honest perspectives it's just so enlightening and so fascinating. Well, you get down to the desk level at the agency, and you get these folks that are just fixated on some of the minutia in terms of what makes it hard to work with a particular carrier. Oh, these guys ask this particular question, or oh, their system does this, or oh, their password thing is that. You start to realize like how much opportunity there is for improvement in the space. Anyway, agent carrier relations is always a deep topic of discussion, and that was no different this time.
What are the must-haves when you're creating a relationship, whether it be with an agency or a carrier or a partner? You guys have 3 different perspectives. And you touched on that from it ends up becoming a relationship issue, because if you do have a carrier that's listening, then they are going to bring you into the conversation, and vice versa, and so on and so forth. So, what are some of those must-haves when you're building a relationship with a carrier? Traci, I'll start with you there.
Trust is the biggest thing. Understanding, to Chris's point, there could be 35,000 ways an agency is doing business. You have to understand how they're doing business, but you have to build the trust in the relationship as everything else in your life. You need to know that if there's a claim and there's an issue or a Friday afternoon special like there is in personal lines all the time, that you need that person to pick up the phone and be there. But you also have to understand the trust, and the agency is not going to pull a fire alarm every time something goes wrong. That they're usually only calling when they actually need something.
And what about you, Val?
I would say consistency and flexibility. So if they're consistent and they're always consistent, or we're consistent with them and vice versa, they're consistent with us, you can kind of forecast on how they're going to react to a unique situation that falls in that gray area. So being very consistent, and to the trust part, which kind of factors into the flexibility. If you're consistent and upfront with them on all aspects of your submissions, if something falls in that gray area, or you really need them to take the business because they might be the only other program, just a little bit of flexibility to help you win the business goes a long way. And so the consistency helps you with them. Their flexibility then creates that trust, and you just have a really nice relationship that you want to win business for that carrier, not also for your agency, but you'd love to place it with that carrier because it'd be a dual win, and it can help your book of business with them. So it helps with that like selective targeting as well for them.
Val, I mean, flexibility is could you give us a good example of when it, an instant where it worked really well, or something that you've seen work really well in that scenario? Right.
So, I mean, 7 years ago, flexibility wasn't a distinguishing attribute for a carrier, because in the soft market, a lot of underwriters will bend to write anything, right? So, but in the last 3 or 4 years, or whatever the estimate is on the hard market, flexibility is huge now because everyone's so rigid with their underwriting guidelines and their loss ratios on what will work and what won't work. If you can work with a carrier up front going after a prospect for an IC, and one company that is flexible, for me anyways, I'm heavy in the life sciences. They will be flexible because I'll be very upfront with them on the prospect, and I'll bring it to them before I even go to the meeting, and they'll say, oh, we saw the submission 3 or 4 years ago, and here were the issues. And so then I say, can we work around those? Sometimes they'll say no, sometimes they'll say maybe, but then a few times they've said, at the time we didn't like it, but knowing that if you and your team go in and you do the strategy you normally do, and you help us implement this risk management, we'll write it, even though we told the other incumbent, even though we gave a declination to the other incumbent, which might piss off the incumbent, but that's not my problem. I went to the carrier, proactively. So that's a good example of flexibility that helps us win accounts that they may have otherwise declined in the past 3 or 4 years.
Great example. Thank you. Chris, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I would say too, and I think Traci and Val provided some great examples. That was part of what I was accountable for on the carrier side, was appointing and managing the overall agency lifecycle. So, and I was at a carrier that was on a really aggressive appointment strategy over the last several years. And quite candidly, it was the 80-20 rule. I mean, it was north of 900 new agency appointments in like a 5-year window. Maybe 10 or 20% of them really actually succeeded. And at first, with the carrier bias, I thought that was just, the agency didn't really give as much value or assign as much value to having access to the carrier was at. But the more and more we started to dig into that and look at how the carrier actually executed against what we thought our value prop was, weren't succeeding there either. So what I would say is that whether you're on the carrier side, whether you're on the broker side, or trying to understand this, is that it's really easy to look at a market that you might lose some accounts to. Maybe they've had sort of just this industry-long romance attached to being able to represent them, but companies change, brokers change. So the more you can spend time really getting into how you do business with them, it's important. You guys have referenced marketing reps. What is the field service model? What are the platforms? What is binding authority? What is the agent or broker record process? I can tell you with real data, across the 900 new agency appointments, the number of them that actually asked to read the agency agreement first I could probably count on less than 2 hands. It blows my mind. So to get kind of cynical, I say sometimes start at what a divorce looks like and work backwards. Because those carrier agreements, those commission agreements, the field service model, the platforms that you're going to be asked to, you guys reference portals, right? And if you're trying to grind and do your own thing and you're not getting phone calls back, and the underwriter's thinking, well, I'm not giving Val time of day. He's not doing the things the way I'm supposed to do things. Like, a lot of it is because people didn't sit down once they got past the romance of the possible deal and having access to a market, or the carrier having access to a hot agent, didn't spend time really understanding the nuance of how to do business together. So it's not the romantic and sexy stuff, but at the end of the day, when the distribution leadership or the marketing team and the senior leadership of the agency step out of the room, and underwriters and producers and account execs have to do business together, all that stuff that was discussed in the nicest offices doesn't carry the weight that it once did. So go one level deeper into really what it looks like to do business with each other.
Thank you for that. So what I'm hearing is it's not just the technology, it's not just the process, it's the relationship that goes hand in hand with all these 3 things. It's just like listening and being open, whether you're a carrier, whether you're an agent or Insurtech, listen and be open to really what your customers are looking for.
I would add real quick, Saima, like we've all heard the old adage that all of this takes people, process, and technology. And when that works well, things actually work well. But it's pretty easy to get out of whack on those types of things and to think about technology as a solution for poor process, or not being willing to manage underperforming people, or to train your staff and those types of things. So it's really important to step back with a broader lens and to actually think about what makes things work or why something is broken. And in my prior life, we would always say if the results start to tank, if submissions start to go down, if hit ratios start to collapse, we want to train our employees. Maybe it's not training. Maybe it's a leadership issue. Maybe we're not holding people accountable. Maybe we haven't defined what success looks like and what exactly do you want an employee to be doing for the 8 hours you're paying them each day. And then are you giving them the tools, the resources, and processes to do it? So, we want to, in this environment, we want to talk a lot about technology, and it is a phenomenal tool to enable those types of things. But oftentimes it's something that we can manage more quickly and more succinctly if, as leaders, we were more engaged, more true to what we were asking our employees to do and holding them accountable.
Thank you.
Any other wrap-up thoughts from Insurtech Boston? I was keeping track of who ate the most Twix bars from the expanded sort of concessions offering. You'd be surprised to learn it was a representative from a New England carrier was hitting the Twix bars pretty hard. What other interesting? We didn't have a.
I don't follow that.
I was trying to think. We didn't have a big. I don't think we had a big VC presence this time. That was maybe a little bit different.
I think that was interesting this time. Is the the audience I felt like was a slightly different blend. You're right. There were fewer finance folks, and they were sort of replaced by agencies. I don't know what that says. Good carrier participation, certainly good tech company participation, but where previously we might have had VCs at the door, this time we had agents and brokers. I don't know. I don't know what that tells us. It tells us something. I guess time will ultimately tell. But I thought that was interesting. It also sort of changed the tenor of some of the discussions that people were having, because it takes it from the hypothetical, big visiony, how are we going to take over the world with all this kind of conversation you might have at a finance level, and down into the, okay, but what can we really get done that you get into with agents and brokers?
Right. Yeah. More technology companies, more agencies and agents. I think MAIA probably had a lot to do with that. The Mass Association of Independent.
Yeah, they did. They were a good sponsor this time.
They were also a sponsor. So thank you. Carriers are, carriers, and not just, regional carriers, but carriers were showing up in force. So it was a good mix. And, probably, the mix we usually strive for versus, I guess more of an industry focused with, industry players who are actually, participating. So, I don't know. Special thanks to the normal host of this podcast, Reed Holsworth, who has no idea we're doing this right now. So this will be when he downloads, this will be a surprise.
Surprise! It's not you.
Sure, he's usually the first person to download his fresh podcast to listen. There won't be. We don't have time to record a new intro to replace his remarks with our own. But anyway, leave a 5-star review wherever you downloaded this. Apple, Spotify, whatever your platform of choice is. We only accept 5-star reviews, and you could leave a positive comment for Kristen in terms of how well she's been doing with Insurtech Boston and editing these podcasts. And thanks for joining us.